Hey, Dr. Darnise here, and today I am talking about strategies, Black people strategies for survival. What are we going to do, y'all? What specific strategies do we as Black people need to employ now that we are in this political context? We know who is the president-elect right now. We know Project 2025, it's about to get up and running. They're already doing it, right? So what are we as Black people going to do? We are well beyond the stage of sitting around talking about Black people need to do for self, Black people need to do this, Black people need to do that, and waiting for some Black leader to just emerge out of the clear blue sky. It's time for us to get very serious about what we are going to do. So what I thought I would do is like go through, talk about some figures from history who have had to deal with similar or worse situations and see what they offer us. What do our historical leaders offer us in terms of the way forward? So I want to focus today on W.E.B. Du Bois, right? And Du Bois, I hope is no stranger to you, but he's the first Black man to get a PhD from Harvard. He was a brilliant sociologist, a complete Renaissance man. He lived almost 100 years, um, and one of our greatest scholars. I mean, there's just not even enough words to give to Du Bois. In fact, at the end, maybe I will read some of his qualifications. You just simply are blown away. When I read that in my college class, they're like, what? How can one person be so well educated and so prolific in the work that he gave us? He's also, really well known for his book, The Souls of Black People. That's often how people know him. Anyway, I thought we would focus on him because he did have a very specific strategy, and this is what we need in terms of where we are now in our political context. I talked a little bit about Booker T. Washington in a previous video because Washington also had a very particular strategy for the uplift of Black people, considering the context of white supremacy and rampant lynching, right? We're talking the early part of the 1900s, really just fresh out of Reconstruction. And now there's a population of free Black people that this country never expected. This country never expected to have a population of free Black people. So now what is going to happen, right? So we had Black leaders emerge who said, okay, this is what our people need to do. We're going to very specifically, this is what our people need to do. This is where we need to focus our resources and our time, our money, etc. And that's what we need now. And we can't just wait for somebody to come out or like drop down out of the sky, like I'm your new leader, so everybody do this. No, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. And so between Washington and Du Bois, we had two different ways of um, dealing with what was called the Negro problem, right? Like this book is called The Negro Problem because the white Americans, it seemed like the biggest problem in America was the Negro. What are we going to do with these free Black people? So this is, this is Du Bois and this is Washington. Washington said we should focus on our industrial education. We should make sure we all have a trade. He established Tuskegee University on the idea that we need to make sure all Black people have a trade, create our own businesses, to create our own communities. Do not think about integration. Put college on the back burner because we're not there as a people, right? Washington was saying we're not there as a people. We got to cover the foundation of people coming out of slavery who were barely literate. They need a trade, they need to be able to take care of themselves. We're not in a position where there's integration, so we need to take care of our own. Okay, so that's again the early part of the 1900s. Here comes Du Bois, who harshly disagreed with Washington. They had such beef. Like you think about Kendrick and Drake, this is the kind of beef that Washington and Du Bois had. Because Du Bois said, we're not going to go hat in hand begging white people for anything. We have already put our blood in the soil here in these United States of America, and we want our payment back, right? We are a people who've already proved our worthiness. We don't have to beg for anything. We demand our equality at this point. And Du Bois said, however, we need a talented tenth. We need 10% of the population, Black population, to be our leaders. And therefore, the 10% need to be educated, university educated. They need to be basically the elite group of Black people who are going to therefore uplift the whole of the race. Right? So, we've ever heard of the talented 10? That's Du Bois. And he said it is absolutely necessary that you have 10% of the Black population who are well educated. And by that he meant a liberal arts education in the best university you could get into, right? So you would be studying, Latin and Greek and literature and mathematics and science. That's what he meant. And Washington was like, you want these people who are relatively off the plantation to study Latin and Greek? How's that going to put food on their table? So you get a sense for why they would be at odds. Washington was much more practical, and having come through slavery himself, Washington's autobiography is called Up from Slavery because he really went through slavery. His perspective was get the foundation strong first, and then we can talk about some of this other stuff. Well, Du Bois said, we don't have to work. We can just go. We ready. We ready. So he wrote, um, let's see. Men of America, the problem is plain before you. Here is a race transplanted through the criminal foolishness of your fathers. Whether you like it or not, the millions are here and here they will remain. So he's really talking to white people, right? Here is a race transplanted through the criminal foolishness of your fathers. Whether you like it or not, the millions are here, Black people, and here they will remain. If you do not lift them up, they will pull you down. Du Bois is saying to white people, if you don't do something to lift up Black people, then the fact that you have a terminal underclass is going to pull you down. Education and work are the levers to uplift a people. Work alone will not do it unless inspired by the right ideals and guided by intelligence. Education must not simply teach work, it must teach life. The talented tenth of the Negro race must be made leaders of thought and missionaries of culture among their people. No others can do this work, and Negro colleges must train men for it. The Negro race, like all other races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. And of course, the language is gendered male because this is the early part of 1900s, and so that's how they spoke, obviously. But what he meant was people, right? But people would say mankind. Also, he wrote, can the masses of the Negro people be in any possible way more quickly raised than by the effort and example of this aristocracy of talent and character? Was there ever a nation on God's fair earth civilized from the bottom upward? Never. It is, ever was, and ever will be from the top downward that culture filters. The talented tenth rises and pulls all that are worth the saving up to their vantage ground. This is the history of human progress, and the two historic mistakes which have hindered that progress were the thinking first that no more could ever rise save the few already risen, or second that it would be better to unrisen to pull the risen down. So he is in constant conflict with Washington, who says, let's do this from the ground up. Let's make sure that all Black people have a trade, they all have a skill, right? And Du Bois is like, that's not how you uplift a race. You don't uplift the race from the bottom. You need a top tier, top 10% who is going to, through intelligence, and we would say now privilege, pull the bottom up. Now, I present that to you. I'll be interested what you have to say in the comments about that, because Du Bois was certainly criticized as being elitist. How are we all going to go to college? How are we all going to do that? Black people didn't have the resources to go to college in mass, same as now, right? Well, we need a top 10%. We're going to cultivate 10% of the entire Black population to be the leaders. and that will benefit the whole. And he said that will also mean that Black people don't have to go hand in hand begging, because Black people will have arrived at this prestigious elite position also, and therefore fit into the upper levels of government and industry. That's the point of being so well educated, right? To fit into the higher levels of government and industry. Well, Washington said, "You're tripping. We are not there yet. Who exactly are you talking about?" Because Du Bois was that type of person, well educated, as I said, first Black man to get a PhD from Harvard. He had a very elite education. He was born and lived in Massachusetts, and so he had a very different experience than Washington. He knew of Black families who had been free, Black families who had money. So he didn't have money himself, but he knew of Black wealthy families. They'd been free, and they had already achieved, they'd become professionals, lawyers and doctors and teachers who were, serving the Black community. So he knew it could be done. Du Bois said, "Of course it can be done. I've done it. I know people who've done it." But Washington said, "You've forgotten about the masses of Black people who are largely illiterate. You are literally talking about them going to college. How are they going to get there? And learning Greek and Latin literature and higher mathematics." So you see the conflict. And I'm asking you to really think about, which of those strategies do you think? Do you think it's been helpful to have an elite population? We could say something like the Obamas right now, right? Because he's literally been president of the United States, or anybody. We could talk about Kamala. We could talk about any of the people who we consider to be at the top. Has that helped raise the whole? Or is it better, as Washington said, you've got to really educate from the bottom and push so that everybody has something. So I will also say, remember I said, then Garvey came in, Marcus Garvey came in and said, "We got to get out of here. The whole United States is toxic. None of this is going to work to our benefit. Let's go." And Du Bois and Garvey then went on to have beef after Booker T. Washington died in 1915. Then the beef became between Garvey and Du Bois, and it was much, much heated. Again, Drake and Kendrick Lamar, it was just like rough out here. And then the other thing about Du Bois is that he was a very strong critic of Christianity, because he felt that it was, as he put it, Jim Crow from the bottom up. American Christianity, he said, was Jim Crow. And so that is what this, there's a lot of that in this book, if you are interested, Du Bois on Religion. And it's a small volume, so it's not really a difficult read at all. Mine is just all marked up. I don't know if you can see that, but I use this quite extensively. Um, he wrote, "The so-called Christianity of white America was nothing more than venomous hypocrisy writ large. A nation's religion is its life," he declared, "and as such, white Christianity is a miserable failure." He said this in 1970, which is really not that long ago, 1970, and then again in 1985. He lived almost 100 years. Okay. "It is painfully true that white Christianity has in the 20th century been curiously discredited. The leading nations representing Jesus' religion have been murdering, maiming, and hurting each other on a scale unprecedented in the history of mankind. Into the white Church of Christ, race prejudice has crept to such an extent that it is openly recognized and is considered the natural and normal thing. These facts do not impugn Christianity, but they do make terrible comment upon the failure of its white followers." Right? So he makes this distinction between, what Christianity is legitimately and what white American Christians have done to it, right? And he says they've made it a terrible failure because of race prejudice. W. E. Du Bois is also famous for saying the main problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line. Again, a man who lived almost the entirety of the 20th century. I mean, I gotta wrap your mind around that. He lived almost the entirety of the 20th century. And he said, main problem is the problem of a color line. And aren't we living that? This last election showed us in no uncertain terms what most Americans want. They want a white leader. And they don't care how degraded he is, how immoral he is. They don't care that he basically defiles this religion of Jesus almost every time he stands up and opens his mouth. They don't care. That's what Du Bois is saying in this quote. He, he's like, the problem, you can say that there's all kind of problems in America. But he says the main problem is the problem of the color line, and race prejudice, and that it will literally destroy America. He goes on in this book to talk about the church aided and abetted the Negro slave trade. It's a very good sort of summary, because it's an edited volume, right? So it is a very good summary of the ways in which Christianity has been complicit, or the ways in which white American Christians have failed the religion itself by their hypocrisy and race prejudice. So there's a lot of good summaries of what Du Bois thought about that. It's like it's Jim Crow from bottom to top. And so he says what black people do with Christianity is yet make it liberating, which he says is a marvel. It's a marvel that black people are able to um, make Christianity usable for black people. So anyway, I just wanted to come on here, and I'm going to come on here with some more of our historical leaders, because they had a very particular way they could offer us. Here's what you do when the Klan is going down the street. Here's what you do when there are bodies hanging from the trees. Here's what you do. And we are at a point now where we are at such a time where we have to say, we need plan and we need to have strategy. We don't have time to sit around complaining and talking about this one is not black enough. And we don't have time, right? We do not. Now, I said a while ago, I was going to just give you a little snippet of Du Bois's credentials. So if you're still here with me, thank you for staying along. Yeah, so I'm going to read you some of his credentials, because he was indeed a genius. Um, so he was born in 1868. Remember, I said he lived almost the entirety of the 20th century. So he was born 1868. All right. Let's see. And Martin Luther King Jr. Eulogized him. He was a tireless explorer and gifted discoverer of social truths. Eulogized Martin Luther King Jr. He received a BA in 1888 from Fisk University, a second BA from Harvard in 1890, and an MA from Harvard in 1892. Now, we could stop there. We could stop there. As I do with my students in the classroom, I was like, did you hear what that? He received a BA, a bachelor's degree from Fisk University, and then a second bachelor's from Harvard in 1890, and an MA from Harvard in 1892. He was just getting started. Who among us has two bachelor's degrees? Okay. And then a master's from Harvard. After studying for 2 years at the University of Berlin, he received his PhD from Harvard in 1895. He was a professor of Greek and Latin at Wilberforce University. Y'all know Wilberforce. He was assistant instructor of sociology. He was professor of economics and history at Atlanta University. He was chairman of the sociology department at Atlanta University. He wrote over 20 books and was a prolific journalist, writing hundreds of essays and articles throughout the course of his life. I'm skipping y'all. In addition to writing, he worked as an activist for social and racial justice. He was the principal founder of the Niagara movement, which was the forerunner of the NAACP. As you probably didn't know, that Du Bois was instrumental in the development of the NAACP. He was much more: world traveler, labor rights supporter, novelist, poet, women's suffrage proponent, anti-war activist, Communist Party member, world peace advocate, statesman, lecturer, and so on. W.B. Du Bois. Um, I mean, uh, and I'm just reading that out, right? What it takes to do what he did is an enormous feat. So I think where we are in American life right now, we can turn to our own scholars, our own leaders, our own intellectuals, our own poets and artists, and say, what did they leave us for how to get through these moments? That's where we are, because no need in lamenting about what other people are not doing for us. What they have demonstrated is they're not going to do it. And it is literally foolish of us to think that they are. So let us figure out strategy. Let us look at our historical leaders. Let us look at our own ancestors, circle the wagons, and have a strategy that will help us survive, right? All right, again, uh, the reading list is in the description box below. That one is free. The other one is the course. It is a self-paced course, so you can just, click on that link, go to that page. You have to sign up for it. You have a whole year's access to work through it at your own pace. And again, it's audio, so you can have that in your ears, while you do whatever you do, while you take a walk, while you work out, while you're getting ready in the morning, whatever it is. Anyway, thank you for hanging out. And if you made it all the way through, let me know. Long haul. Put long haul in the comments. And I'll see you next time.